Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Ron Klinger here, host of the Clutch Podcast and the founder and president of Motivational Transitions. Welcome to session number 3 of a 4-part series known as the Summer of Insights. Today, we're going to be talking about communicating with clarity. Honest to goodness truth, Scouts honor, I literally just got out of a community meeting of HR professionals. And guess what was cited as one of the number one greatest challenges across organizations, especially today in the world of AI and technology-driven activities? It's communication. It's how to communicate with clarity. It's how to be effective in communication. And that's exactly what we're going to dial in here today. So sit back, fasten your seatbelts, put your hats on, and let's hit the road. All right, as we get forward here and dancing, quick agenda for the day. This is a 20-minute overview session of content and engagement. I'm going to quickly go over, again, reinforcing the insights methodology that we're going to utilize today. Little mini, tiny review on color energies and preferences. And then we're going to dive in deep to today's topic, which is communicating with clarity. If at any point in time you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I've got a couple questions that came in from people who couldn't make it today, and I will share that during the question and answer session later after we get through the content. So let's jump straight in. First of all, you may want to take something out to write with. Take some notes. If you've got your profile with you, it will absolutely help you to have it. I will be referring to some specific pages within your Insights Discovery profile. And again, those of you in this audience, you have the content. If you don't have the content, well, I've got some information at the end. If you'd like to get an Insights Discovery profile or to understand how Insights can help you communicate with clarity, if I can communicate, we'll be glad to talk about that as well. But having something to write with and have your profile ready be very handy. So real quick, mini review. I've only got 20 minutes here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I want to spend more time on the communications component, but I can't get there without doing this. You know, the key to insights, and I've shared this in past sessions, I've shared this when I do the training, it's all about personal effectiveness that then goes to team and organizational effectiveness. And it starts with, hey, how can I explore more about me? What can I do to recognize, and you'll see the spelling with an S versus a Z, because Insights Learning and Development is out of Dundee, Scotland. So you'll see some of the proper UK English versus our English here in the United States. Once you understand self, understand others, then how do you adapt your behavior to interact more effectively with others? Isn't that the whole, that's everything. How do we interact? If we can't do that really well, if we don't know where we're coming from or where they're coming from, to make sure that those interactions are positive so we can effectively work with others, that empowers and enables and elevates our ability to take action and effective action towards whatever the task is that may be at hand. To put more simply, hey, how well do we understand self? Insights framework, how well do we understand others? Can we adapt and connect? Can we use the tools in our toolkit that Insights provides so we can develop those usable interpersonal strategies? And then adapt and connect, and it goes together. Like, how do I work with this person? How do I connect with that person? How do I connect with the leaders that are above me in my organization? How do I connect? Heaven forbid, how can I connect with my own family members? Right? There's a powerful part of this tool and using Insights and the Insights journey. It doesn't only help you professionally, it helps you personally as well to ultimately take action. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Again, have to reinforce that so it sets us up for success in the following discussion. As we go forward, our key to success, and I've shared this before, we have stimulus, we have response, and this is happening all day, every day, multiple times a day, thousands of interactions. Those responses that we drive, what we can control, they're going to be positive, they're going to be negative, or they might, heaven forbid, they be neutral, kind of lukewarm. Not really sure. Jury's still out. What do you want more of? Yeah, you'd hopefully want more of the positive, not the negative, right? And in order to do that, we have to understand that there's a pause button in between stimulus and response. And that stimulus and response and that pause can allow us to gain a heightened awareness, understand self, understand others, adapt and connect, that if we're willing to use it, can drive more effective outcomes or responses to whatever it is that we're facing and that we're dealing with, right? And that's Insights. Insights is the lens. Insights is the language that helps us to do that more effectively. And our freedom, after we just celebrated America's 250 years and our birthday this past 4th of July, that space between stimulus and response to choose, that is our freedom. That is what enables and empowers us to be successful. individually as well as organizationally. As we go forward, again, mini insights color energy overview, right? We've got the 4 color energies: fiery red, sunshine yellow, earth green, and cool blue. From there, there's some adjectives, again, competitive, demanding, determined, strong-willed, and purposeful. That describes that fiery red color energy. Sociable, dynamic, demonstrative, enthusiastic, and persuasive. Impact sunshine yellow. That's how sunshine yellow may show up in your world. Earth green, caring, encouraging, sharing, patient, and relaxed. And then cool blue, cautious, precise, deliberate, questioning, and formal. Now, this is just different ways. These color energies, how our preferences show up. How do we engage? What do we do and how we do that? And the reality is we are a combination of all 4. We're not black or white or even those 4. We're a combination of our most preferred to our least preferred. If you've gone through the training, we've covered this in great depth, but it's important to reiterate, we don't have little blue, yellow, green, sunshine yellow, fiery red, cool blue, or we don't know. We have people who lead from those preferences, but having that color energy language helps us communicate more effectively, understand where folks are coming from. And that's the power of insights. That's why I've been using it for well over 20 years. And I continue to use it and continue to get asked to use it on the daily. We start talking about this, we're also tied into Jungian psychology and the preferences: introverted, extroverted, thinking, feeling. And what you wind up getting is a cool blue is that introverted thinker, earth green is the introverted feeler, sunshine yellow, extroverted feeler, fiery red is the extroverted thinker. So when we talk about it, it produces a unique style. It produces a way by which how we show up. And that's important to understand the underpin and the undertow of the color energies. Not only do we need to understand the color energies, but understand how that color energy shows up from a preferences perspective, right? Extroversion and introversion is kind of how we connect to the world around us. Where do we get that energy? How do we recharge those batteries? The introvert's going to be more smaller group, more less people, time for reflection, time for being alone. Extroverts bring more people, right? People, those of us, those of you that know me well, I'm an extreme extrovert. I get energy off of being around others. I get energy on that connection. That might be too much for someone on the introverted side, but the extroverted side, which is that fire red and that sunshine yellow, thrives. It helps them to connect in varying degrees. How much from the scale 0 to 6? What are we talking about? How does that show up? And then we have our thinking preferences on the top of how we make decisions, and then our feeling on the bottom, how we make decisions. Do we think it through, logic, data, details, or do we go with a gut level, intuitive? Right here, I feel it. Go with that in the way that we make decisions. So that's how I like to kind of summarize, but to recap a lot of what really needs to be understood, because when you understand that, you can communicate with clarity. And that's where we're going to drive the bus and take it into the next section here. So one of the things that's important to understand, we start talking about interpersonal communication, right? And now we've got text. Now we have so many ways to communicate. Honestly, sometimes I think it gets overdone. But how good, if you had to pause for a second and ask yourself, if I asked everybody in your circle of influence, the people that you communicate and connect with on the daily, the most, in your day-to-day life, at work, at home, in your community, are you an effective communicator? How would they rate you on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being low, 10 being high. How would you rate? Here's why I asked that question, because when we start talking about it, and according to Albert Moravian, what we communicate is 7% are the words that we choose to use. 38% is the tone. And I don't like that tone you use. We understand tone very well. We are definitely not tone deaf in our society. So if we're talking 7% words, 38% tone of voice, 55% is context or body language of what we interpret. Your words are saying one thing, but your nonverbals are saying another. I'm confused. Where we had a disconnect, had a misfire. Right? Look at those numbers. Those are pretty large numbers. In other words, communication winds up becoming 7% about what you say, and with those factors, 93% about how you say it. So that 38 and that 50, it's huge. That tone of voice, that language, but also the connection that we make, that really matters. So as we dial in and we keep moving forward here, again, coming back to the 4 color energies, it's important to recognize the preferences that are there. and what those color energies describe. And then also, understanding and recalling that cool blue is the introverted thinker. Earth green as that shows up with that introverted feeling preference, right? And then sunshine yellow and fiery red are the extrovert, feeler on the bottom, thinker on the top. And I think that if you truly can understand, like this slide is the epitome of insights, understand what the color energies represent tied to those preferences. Wow, you can communicate in ways one can only hope to imagine. And the tool helps to facilitate because it gives you the lens and the focal point and the auditory to understand and read the moment. So when you go through stimulus and response, you've got an opportunity to actually respond in a way that is more effective. The key in this whole entire process, especially with communication, it's tied into that adapting and connecting. That is the topic of our fourth session. I'll talk more about that here at the end of today's talk. But when we really start digging into adapting and connecting, it's about doing unto others as they would be done unto. I have an example that I like to use in my training, and it works out really well, especially in person and depending upon the audience. When we start talking about doing unto others as they would be done unto, as it relates to communication, I like to use the following example. ¿Cuántas personas aquí que están escuchando esta sesión que pueden hablar en español? ¿Hay alguien que comunique en español? Yes, I'm bilingual. I use Spanish all the time where I can. Why do I use that? And how and why on this particular slide? Because a lot of times when I'm using Spanish, because hey, let's go talk to this guy. Nobody looks at me and says he speaks Spanish, he's bilingual, right? It just doesn't happen. And I'm okay with that. But when I get a chance to use it, I'm almost always using it as a point of clarity, as a point of communication, as a point of successful and beneficial outcomes, because I have the other language to use. I've invested heavily in using it. Why wouldn't I use it in times of need where it's present? I look at insights mean much of the same way. If you have the language, and maybe someone else doesn't, but that still doesn't mean you can't read the situation in the moment to better understand, okay, how do I communicate? So that's what we're going to dive into. When we start talking about we're going to start with fiery red, right? Folks that lead, notice my language, that lead with that fiery red as their most preferred, they're going to prefer that fast pace for communication, and they want you to get to the point. You may become impatient, like, okay, yeah, I'm not, where are you going with this, Ron? What's taking place? So better get to the point. They're going to express themselves and their ideas with confidence. It's going to be extrovertedly communicated. It's going to come outward. They're the extroverted thinker. So that's how that shows up. A lot of times, unfortunately, fiery red gets a bum rap, and those that lead with that fiery red color energy, because it's like, oh, you've already made a decision. No. People with fiery red like to talk through the options, but because of how it shows up, many people think, well, what do you need us for? You've already made the decision. No, that's the whole point. I want to talk it out loud, right? Like written documents to be brief and concise. Tell me what you're going to tell me, and then let me get, because I'm constant. Fiery red is juggling a lot of different activity, right? And that's just natural to their preferences. Unfortunately, here's a challenge. Typically not good listeners and can be dismissive of others' input because their head's not stopped. They're constantly thinking, and it's constantly coming out. It's coming out extroverted, auditory. It's being communicated. It's being articulated, right? So one of the things that you can understand when we start looking at this, when you start communicating with fire red, do be direct and to the point. Focus on results and outcomes or objectives. And then the best one, be brief, be bright, be gone. The story, no, they don't have time for the story, and they don't have the patience. Not that they don't care, because they do in most cases. It's the fact that there's so much that they're trying to accomplish and achieve because of that drive, because of that need, because of that persistence. Now, just like anything that we're talking about with insights and the color energies, we need to understand, hey, turned up a little too much, it becomes a barrier. So also, if you lead with that fiery red, please understand, hey, I can be turning up that drive, that need, that sometimes there's a requirement to meet others where they need to be met as well, right? Because you don't want to waffle or hesitate. Feelings, no, it's facts, it's details, it's actions, it's outcomes, it's results. And definitely don't try to take over. That's not going to go well. So how can you show up, do the things that are above? Hey, to a manager, to a leader, I've got A, B, and C. I want to do X and Y. What do you think? Brief, to the point. Great, thank you. Boom, go on with the day. Just as one example. So let's move on to sunshine yellow. Sunshine yellow, communicate with enthusiasm and excitement. They're the extroverted feeler. So remember, that's how that's showing up. So there's your cues and clues that we leak the truth about ourselves all the time. So that really matters. It shows up very much in what we do. Tend to prefer pictures to text. They want to see, they want to connect, they want to be a part of, right? Why? Text, data, details. Oh my God, I got to slow down. May finish other sentences and appear impatient because they're communicating, connecting outwardly, right? That feeling is that connection side, but it shows up extrovertedly, right? And that presence, and prefer to speak than to listen and can become easily distracted. Squirrel, if not actively involved. And so a lot of times this looks at people like, oh, you're not paying attention. No, I actually am someone, if you know me, you know, well, I lead with an immense amount of sunshine yellow. I'm always joking. I'm good at listening. I don't sit still. Call it whatever you want to call it, label it whatever you want to label it. But I'm better when I'm doing more. Silence is deafening to me. And I don't know if that resonates with anyone else that leads with sunshine yellow, but it definitely is the case for me. So let's talk about what do we do and what do we not do. Do be friendly and sociable, entertaining and stimulating, open and flexible. Why? Because I'm probably going to talk about 10 things in 20 minutes. Folks that lead from sunshine yellow got a lot to say, a lot to share, and especially if they get passionate about it. Don't bore them with details. Now, details can be done, just not overdone, right? Tie them down with routine or ask them to work alone. And those, again, it's the extroverted feel. They get energy, the connection to others. So when we start, again, applying the preferences to the color energies, it makes a lot more sense. It helps us to better understand. It helps us to better read and adapt and connect. So let's go to the next one, earth green. Okay, so we're working our way around the insights color energy wheel. Earth green. Slow pace with plenty of quiet time to reflect on issues. Why? They're the introverted feeler. Now let's recall this introverted feeling. Taking it in, I'm going to process, and in most all cases, who, what, and the impact, right? Sometimes prefer written words so they can go away and read and digest it over time. Again, it's the reflective side, it's the processing side, but it's checking it against those emotions, that extroverted feeling, introverted feeling. I'm going to process it inwardly. I'm going to bring it in versus sunshine yellow, extroverted. I'm going to talk about it out loud. So that's where the combination is feeling shows up introverted versus extroverted for earth green. Listen attentively and show genuine concern because they do. Right? Folks that lead with earth, they genuinely care. Great relationship builders, great at being present. They're probably the folks that you go to when you want to have something to talk to because they're going to do a great job at listening. Mirror that, give that back to them. And then do their quiet introverted approach. They sometimes give the impression they're not actively involved. No, they're in. It's inward reflection. It's inward processing. It's inwardly working through whatever the situation or circumstances might be that they're presented with. When we continue to move forward, so let's talk about, so what do you need? What do you do? Earth green, be patient, supportive. Like, it's not like being patient, like, oh my gosh, they can't get on the bus. No, it's just understand the thought process, understand the communication style. Slow down and work at their pace. Why? Because you're going to painfully go through, especially on the people side of impact, and then ask their opinion and give them time to answer. Say, like, hey, I want your thought on this. Hey, get back to me by the end of the day. Why? Because they're going to painstakingly go through it. And you want that. That's a value. Now, it becomes a barrier when it's too much, and we take forever to make that decision or come back with feedback, right? Which sometimes can be the case. But again, it's understanding. It's understanding that resonance, what works. Don't take advantage of their good nature. That will probably trigger, right? Push them to make quick decisions. Unless you have to. And I'd like to put a caveat because this one becomes a problem a lot of times in groups in dynamics, when I talk, oh, what do you mean? We got to know. Sometimes you have to say, if someone leads with that earth green, hey, Bob or hey, Sue, look, I recognize as a manager and a leader, I appreciate you would prefer more time. We are up against the gun on this one. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we got to figure this out in the next 30 minutes. I know you prefer more time. That's a great way of adapting and connecting. Because those last minute surprises, whoa, time out. Because they've already got their orientation and connection to the world and the people in it. It's already been done. It's already been figured out. So when you throw that in, it's kind of like throwing in, someone on their bicycle and someone throws a stick in their front wheel and they don't know where they're going to land. But if you can acknowledge, you're going to get a lot of support because again, this is that caring and supportive and encouraging preference that shows up in earth green. All right, moving on. Cool blue. Prefer information and communication to be written, prefer documents and reports that contain details, often like to come back after a meeting for further clarification. They're thinking it through, but they have to, again, think it through the process. And also tend to probe for additional information. Sometimes it's seen as being insensitive, and it's not. It's just that's how they function. That's how folks that lead, I shouldn't say folks who lead with that cool blue, how they show up. We talk about do's and don'ts. Make sure you're well prepared. Make sure you're thorough. Put things in writing. Give them time to consider the details. This is all about helping people understand and put them in a place to win, right? Don't get too close or hug. They have a barrier. Now, the closer you get, the further they will probably back up. That's how you can also tell. A great way to be able to differentiate between introversion, preference for introversion, extrovert. Shake someone's hand. Shake someone's hand. If they have a preference for introversion, there's going to be an extension. If there's a preference for extroversion, they're going to pull you in close, right? So that's kind of how that works. Don't be flipping on important issues and then change too much routine without notice. Now, I've got a little bit past my 20 minutes because there's a lot of content to cover in a very short period of time, but you've got resources available in your profile. You have the effective communication page, which is on around 11 or 12. You have barriers to communication, right? These are great things to understand and process and have conversation around, especially with folks that are close to you, folks you work with, your team members at home. These are how, hey, I prefer this. I prefer you didn't do that. And then the other one that's really powerful is you have the opposite type resource that's in your profile. So it talks about the opposite type, but then more importantly, there's communicating with your opposite type. So I really would encourage you to dial into those resources in your profile. And the last resource I'll share is, the Simply Connect communication model. This is where there becomes a miscommunication or a misfire. And we didn't connect and that you see it, you read it's like something. All right, what did I say that didn't? We're missing. We're not on the same page. So I love this model because models make things very simple to follow. And so when you start talking about the Simply Connect communications, it starts with that sunshine yellow. Hey, Ron, look, I reckon we're not on the same page. Let's make sure we get a win-win out of this, right? Then you move into step two. Like, tell me what you understand of what just happened, or where the misfire is, or help me understand your approach. Stephen Covey, one of his habits is first seek to understand, then be understood. So once we can start out with that positivity and that sunshine yellow, create the collaborative win-win. That's our goal. Are we on the same page? We're in this together. Yeah. So help me understand what took place. Give me your perspective of what's going on. Then be understood. Well, that arrow should be a two-way arrow. It goes back and forth because ultimately, once we get a clarity on where two people or the parties are coming from, well, then step four is you reach agreement. So it's about engaging with positivity, enthusiastically, empathetically to create a win-win partnership. First, seek to understand, then be understood, then work your way over to, okay, so now that we've got all that, what are the issues? Where are we going to go? And what's the agreement? How are we going to go forward? Or how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Or how do we make sure are we on the right page? Let's recap before we break. Great ways to connect, great ways to communicate, and to maximize that experience. And with that said, as a rapid goes, this is quick. Right? All of this is about this equation of stimulus and response. Do you want a positive result, negative result, neutral? Are you willing to hit the pause button? Help me understand. Tell me more. And that Simply Connect communications model. Better read the moment, right? Are you gaining that awareness? Are you willing to use that? And how do you help insights close that gap so that you can respond easier, quicker, and to communicate with clarity by understanding and adapting and connecting where other people are coming from? So with that being said, any questions or comments? Again, I had a couple of questions like, hey, I can't be there. And one of the questions that came in, Ron, I love using insights, is how it was phrased. Right? And it was specific to how do I communicate with my opposite type. If you understand the opposite type, again, utilizing those resources in your profile, my suggestion is if you've got someone that you work with, this is a work-related question, find someone else that fits that opposite type who you've got significant relational capacity with. You can talk openly, freely, and say, help me understand. Now, it may not be perfect. If you've got insights profiles, you can figure that out pretty easily. If not, it's like, who's my complement? Try it out with people who think differently than you, and then work that with the person where there may be a challenge. And that's how this was presented. Again, use a Simply Connect communications model. Hey, Bill, it's important that we work together, right? Help me understand where you're coming from. And listen, genuinely, authentically, actively listen. and then work back and forth in the dialogue and be understood and understanding, and then reach agreement on how to go forward. That was one of the more powerful questions that came in. And because of my time, I'm going to limit it there. But I think it's critical and key that we always question, okay, where are other people coming from? How can I use insights to read the moment? And the reason I want to bring that up, because in 2 weeks, our next session on July 22nd, it's about adapting and connecting. And so it's going to be kind of the wrap up and bow around all the topics that we've already covered on Insights this summer. It's going to take into account our communication. It's going to take into account goals. It's going to take into account our profile, but it's going to help us to better say, okay, how do we read the moment? How do we best identify where others are coming so we can meet them where they need to be met, feed them the way that they need to be fed, so that we can produce positive and effective outcomes. That is the entire purpose and point of this Summer of Insights. This has been session 3. You can go out onto the website at motivationaltransitions.com. You can register for this session. If you get the emails in the email distribution, you'll have the recordings. This will be posted as well. And ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time for dialing in and listening in. As always, if you would like a soft copy, or if you've never been part of Insights and you've stumbled upon this video, send an email, say, hey, Ron, I'd like to learn more. Happy to engage you, happy to share more about Insights, what it looks like, the journey, etc. Or klinger@mtran.com. If you're like, Ron, I can't find my copy of my profile due to the fact that Insights Learning and Development is out of the UK. They are prescribed to GDPR, which is the privacy of information and sharing of information coming out of the European Union that we have to honor. I can gladly give that to you. Or if you'd like a copy of the brand new digital Insights profile, just send a request to me if you've got a profile, and I'll be glad to send it on your way. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your presence today, of following along, being a part of this discussion. And I wish nothing more than for you to go forward, have positive outcomes, connect and communicate with clarity. I thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time. See ya.